Hello and welcome to this roundtable discussion hosted by the Canada School of Public Service as part of the CAPPA National Case Competition. Bonjour et bienvenue à cette table ronde tenue par l'École de la fonction publique du Canada dans le cadre de la compétition nationale d'études de cas de l'ACPAP. Mon nom est Josiane Paul et je suis la directrice intérimaire de l'équipe des politiques et des relations stratégiques ici à l'École de la fonction publique du Canada. Il me fait plaisir d'être votre modératrice pour aujourd'hui. My name is Josiane Paul, and I am the acting director of the Policy and Strategic Relationship team here at the Canada School of Public Service, and it will be my pleasure to be your moderator for this wonderful session today. To ensure the session goes as smoothly as possible, we would kindly ask you to turn your camera and mic off. Pour que la session se déroule le mieux possible, nous vous demandons de bien vouloir fermer votre caméra ainsi que votre microphone. Before we go further, I would like to acknowledge the land from which I am talking to you today. I am located in Ottawa on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Some of you today may be joining us from various parts of this country, and I therefore encourage you to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the territory you are occupying. Permettez-moi tout d'abord de reconnaître que les terres dont je vous parle aujourd'hui sont situées à Ottawa. Elle se trouve sur le territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Certains d'entre vous nous joignent aujourd'hui en provenance de d'autres régions du pays et je vous encourage à prendre un moment pour reconnaître le territoire que vous occupez. As you may have already noticed, the conversation today will be bilingual. La conversation aujourd'hui sera bilingue. Please do not hesitate to ask the question in the language of your choice. To do so, please use the chat function as no verbal question will be accepted. So please call on your best writing skills to ask questions or make comments in the chat. N'hésitez pas à poser les questions dans la langue officielle de votre choix. Pour ce faire, veuillez utiliser la fonction chat et sortir votre plus belle plume pour nous écrire des commentaires ou des questions dans la fonction chat puisqu'aucune question de vive voix ne sera acceptée. Comme nous l'avons mentionné précédemment, il me fait plaisir d'être avec vous pour discuter des parcours de carrière et des moyens pour les réaliser. Pour ce faire, aujourd'hui, je serai accompagnée de 3 panélistes qui partageront avec nous leur expérience et répondront à vos questions. As we mentioned earlier, I am delighted to be with you today to discuss career path and the means to achieve them. I'll be joined today by 3 panelists who will share their personal experience and answer your questions. Our panelists are Caitlin Merota, Maurel Andrews, and Kevin Luninga. With no further ado, let's listen a little bit more about them, and we will start with Caitlin. Caitlin is a recent graduate from a dual degree program at York University and the Paris Institute for Political Studies Strasbourg, earning a master's degree in Public and Internal Affairs, as well as a Master of International Relations. She is currently working as a junior evaluation analyst at Environment and Climate Change Canada, and has experience working with Accessibility Standard Canada and Shared Services Canada. Elle a également une formation en sciences de la vie puisqu'elle détient un baccalauréat en pharmacologie de l'Université McGill. Dans ses passe-temps, elle aime bien lire, s'occuper de ses nombreuses plantes, s'impliquer dans la communauté et ainsi qu'explorer la scène culinaire diversifiée de Toronto. Caitlin, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career journey, please?
Yeah, thank you, Josiane, for that intro. And hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you all today. My name is Caitlin, and I'm currently serving as an EC3 Junior Evaluation Analyst at Environment and Climate Change Canada. And I'm excited to, as I said, be here today, share a little bit about my journey, although I'm still at the beginning of my career. As it said in my bio, before entering into the world of public service, my academic background was, pretty science focused. So from very early on, my career path has taken some unanticipated twists, but I'm very happy with where I've ended up. And I definitely think that my sort of academic background has equipped me with maybe a slightly different set of skills and perspectives than some of my classmates and colleagues. And I think there's a benefit to that diversity. Again, as mentioned in my bio, I'm a recent graduate. I just graduated this past October. It was from a dual degree bilingual program, which I think really set me up well for a career in the federal public service because I had the opportunity to study in French. In the context of those 2 degrees, I was able to gain some valuable work experience through internships at Accessibility Standards Canada, which is a Crown corporation that creates and reviews accessibility standards that apply to the federal government and also federally regulated entities. And then at Shared Services Canada, which administers all of the government's digital and IT services. And this sort of combination of experiences, I think, kind of led me to where I am today at the evaluations at Environment and Climate Change Canada. My biggest piece of advice for people who are looking to bridge into the federal public service postgraduate is to network through your internships. That's definitely, I think, an invaluable resource. That's how I landed my job right now. When I worked at the evaluation shop at Shared Services Canada, my director was able to sort of share my resume around. And that's how I got my interview. And I just also wanted to touch on my current role because when I was in school, we didn't focus too heavily on evaluations, but most departments in the federal government have an internal evaluation branch where they sort of assess how and why and whether a program, initiative, or policy works with the aim of informing program renewal, future decision making. And so that I think is a really interesting aspect of the federal public service that I think isn't as common, known about, maybe talked about. So yeah, but I'm really happy to be here, to be working on my skills and competencies as an evaluator in my early career. And I think in the future, my goal would be to branch out and try to gain some work experience in the field of international environmental negotiations, as that's what I specialized in school. But obviously, I recognize that I'm still really early in my career, and I'm very open to other possibilities as they come along. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I'm excited to share a little bit more about you all as we work through the panel.
Thank you, Caitlin. Merci beaucoup for shedding some light on your career development. Now let's turn to Morel. Morel joined the public service as a co-op student at Global Affairs Canada, also known as GAC, in 2015. After graduating from the University of British Columbia in 2017 and brief stints in New York and Nairobi, she returns to GAC International Security Branch in 2018. After 5 fulfilling years working on gender and international peace operation, she recently left her Ottawa-based position as a senior policy advisor and joined Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, that we all call CERNAC, as a Vancouver-based assistant negotiator working with Coastal First Nation in BC. Morels believe in building better policies for everyone and to pushing our system to be more inclusive. À cet effet, elle a travaillé avec succès avec le ministre de la Justice et le procureur général pour élaborer une modification majeure au Code criminel canadien et visant à transformer les façons dont les ordonnances de non-publication peuvent être appliquées aux victimes d'infractions sexuelles en leur donnant plus de pouvoir et plus de choix dans le système juridique. Pendant son temps libre, Morel aime skier dans les Rocheuses, faire du camping et planter des fleurs sauvages sur sa terrasse. Morel, over to you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career journey.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I want to acknowledge that I'm joining today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam First Nations in what we know today as Vancouver. Like Josiane mentioned, my current role is within Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, not in the headquarters in the National Capital Region, but rather in a regional office here in Vancouver, BC. My current role is an assistant negotiator, and I work within the Treaty and Aboriginal Government Northwest branch of the department. I am currently an indeterminate employee at the EC5 level, but throughout my career, I have occupied literally every single type of contract type. So I started as a co-op, I entered into the public service later as a casual, did many years as a term employee, and then eventually became indeterminate a couple of years ago. I started at an EC3. At times, I've been acting at an EC6 level, but at every step of the way, I've had to learn the HR system of the public service and honestly also fight it for the majority of my time because it's just the nature of the system that we work within. With that caveat, I have had a very wonderful and fulfilling career in the public service so far. I started off as a student working in North America mission liaison, later did a co-op term in Western European trade, and really didn't find my calling, I would say, in the Department of Global Affairs Canada at that time. So I decided when I graduated to move to Nairobi and work for a year with the Aga Khan Foundation as an International Development Management Fellow, and then later moved to New York to work in the Undersecretary General's Office of the Department of Field Support at the UN. Because I was just chasing my career path. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I knew that trying different things might help, illuminate the path that was right for me. And that worked out really well because while I was in New York, I saw a job posting for a position again at Global Affairs Canada. I thought third time might be the charm. And it was. I joined the ELSI Initiative for Women in Peace Operations in 2018 and spent the last 5 years of my career doing that work, which was really quite incredible. I love the files, but I saw lots of issues inside my department, and I'm sure Kevin will be able to build off of some of this as a current Global Affairs Canada employee. But I learned about the importance of advocacy within the workplace and pushing back on systems and structures that honestly don't really work well for people. So I helped establish the Young Professionals Network with a bunch of my colleagues, had really great opportunities to work as a liaison officer on ministerial visits to Canada from other countries, and had the privilege of working with the COVID repatriation and Afghanistan evacuation a couple years ago. These opportunities, which I'll maybe be able to expand a bit more on, gave me really important skills and competencies that I think have translated really well into my wider vision of what public service is, and the ways that we can improve our public service, because that's so important. Other than that, I think I'll expand a bit more in the panel. But one thing I will leave you with, I really liked how Caitlin left you with like a lesson at the end of her introduction. So I'll say the lesson for me is to recognize the importance of various types and forms of public service and remember that our institutions are not perfect. They need good, smart people to reimagine what they can be and to help transform them. And the public service is not for everyone. It might take you a few tries to find a place that really resonates and files that you feel passionate about. But in all your work that you do, reject complacency and know that the public service is a beast, but individuals and groups of people can help make it a better place.
Impressive journey, Morel, and I really like your reflection and the lesson. I think you and Caitlin nailed it. It's really important to think about where we are and knowing those differences within the public service when we're a young public servant. So now let's keep the discussion going as we hear from our next presenter, Kevin Lunianga. Kevin is the Deputy Director in the Human Rights Division at Global Affairs Canada. He joined the federal government in November 2018 as a case management officer with the Canada Student Loan Program at Employment and Social Development Canada. Prior to joining the public service, Kevin worked as a flight attendant for 2 years with WestJet and had the opportunity to travel the world. Né d'une mère rwandaise et d'un père congolais, il a passé sa jeunesse au Canada, principalement à Ottawa, et au Zimbabwe. Pendant son temps libre, Kevin aime beaucoup voyager, rencontrer de nouvelles personnes et danser. Pour lui, l'afrobeat, le soca et le hip-hop n'ont pas de secret. À toi, Kevin.
Merci beaucoup, Josiane, and thanks so much for inviting myself and the other esteemed panelists for a quick conversation. So as Josiane mentioned, my name is Kevin Lunianga. I work at Global Affairs Canada right now as a Deputy Director in the Human Rights Division, but what my file focuses on specifically is on anti-Semitism and Holocaust preservation, which, as everyone knows, is a very hot issue, and I'll circle back as to how I got there and walk you through very quickly my career path. So I did my master's at the University of Toronto in criminology. It was a 1-year master's and it was course-based. Now you'll hear from both Caitlin and Morel, a lot of folks actually join the government through internships and they get either bridged in or have a foot in because they did an internship through their through their university. I did not have that experience. So I actually applied online on the jobs.gc.ca website for, I could not tell you how many jobs I applied to, but I applied to at least 50 jobs just to get my foot into the government. And so I did that after finishing my master's in 2018. And then I was supposed to go to the UN in Thailand at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to do a 6-month internship starting in January 2019. So I said to myself, okay, I graduated in like September, October 2018. I have 3 months before I go on this internship. I was living in Toronto at the time. So I said to myself, let me go back home to Ottawa and let me go spend time with my family. My parents are getting older. I've kind of been MIA for the past couple of years. So let me just go there for a couple of months. And then come January 2019, I'm going to fly over to Thailand to do this awesome internship with the UN. Now, lesson to everyone on the call, always have a backup plan, just in general. Always make sure that you have something just in case things don't work out. Because thanks to me constantly applying on the jobs.gc.ca website, when it came to time for me to go to Thailand for this internship, I was told that it was no longer available and that I'd have to wait another 8 months. So thankfully, I had applied online and I got this casual opportunity to work as a case management officer, which is a PM2 role, which is pretty entry level and program administration. And another lesson for folks is just remember, you might have an advanced degree or you might have a lot of qualifications, but really what's most important is getting your foot into the government. The level and the classification, I would argue, aren't super, super relevant. It's really just about getting your foot in. And once you're in, maneuvering yourself and situating yourself to go where you want to go. Kind of like what Caitlin was saying about wanting to do international negotiation stuff on the environment. So I get into the government now and I continue to apply to jobs everywhere. And I landed a job actually at Global Affairs Canada as a senior officer in the emergency operations group for the consular team. So whenever Canadians are abroad, if they're arrested, if they are victims of crime, they would call this 24-hour center and I would pick up the phone and give them advice, tell them what to do, work with our diplomatic offices abroad to make sure we support Canadians. And I did that for a year and a half. Kept on applying for competitions, and then I switched a year and a half later to work in the Cabinet Affairs Unit at Global Affairs Canada. Got some really good experience understanding how the government works, how machinery of government operates, what is a memoranda to cabinet. I really understood the structure, which was very, very key and important. And the good thing about working in cabinet affairs, if anyone's curious, is that you actually have a lot of free time in the summer when cabinet is not sitting. And so in my previous job, what that meant was they let me go on temporary assignment for a couple of weeks in the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And so I was there doing a temporary assignment very, very briefly. And next thing I knew, they offered me a 1-year contract in the minister's office. So just to give you a sense, like none of my career was planned in a way that I knew exactly where I would be in 2-3 years. I just applied to many, many jobs. I was in many what we call pools and had bargaining chips, and then opportunities just kind of fell through sort of on my lap unexpected. So just to close up, after a year working in the minister's office, I was on assignment there. I was working closely on human rights issues. That was one of my files. And I met the director responsible for human rights at Global Affairs Canada. And he talked to me about this job working for Canada's special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. And given how hectic working in the minister's office was, I said, absolutely, I will take this job. And it's a deputy director, so management level gig. And I said, 100%, I want some time to breathe and just, be the expert on something. And this seems like a pretty calm file for now. That was September 27th. And then 2 weeks later, the war broke out. And so it's been quite the experience since then. And I'm very happy to share that with you folks as we progress in the panel today.
Merci, Kevin. C'était très intéressant d'entendre parler de ton parcours professionnel dans la fonction publique fédérale. And I totally agree with you about opening as many doors as possible. It is really key in a professional journey in the public service. For the people in the room, I would like you to encourage you to put some question in the chat. So we can hear a little bit from you and answer what you are wondering. This panel is really for you, so please be inspired and send up some questions. Donc pour les gens dans la salle, je suis tout oui, j'ai le goût de vous entendre. Ce panel est pour vous entendre, pour répondre à vos questions. Donc je vous encourage grandement à écrire des questions dans le chat. Par contre, avant qu'on se tourne vers le chat, j'aimerais poser une question de mon cru à nos panélistes. En fait, quand je vous écoute, je vois que vos parcours ont été extrêmement diversifiés. Comme on en parlait, vous avez ouvert des portes, vous avez regardé plusieurs opportunités, vous avez testé des choses pour vous assurer que vous trouviez ce qui vous convenait le mieux. Donc, ce que j'aimerais savoir, avant de vous trouver dans votre emploi actuel, comment avez-vous plus précisément pensé à développer vos compétences, vos expériences pour vous épanouir professionnellement? Et là, je veux dire, pas nécessairement de trouver le bon emploi, mais parfois de trouver les activités, les autres choses que vous pouviez faire dans votre milieu de travail pour vous permettre d'avoir des compétences et des des cordes supplémentaires à votre arc quand vous allez développer votre carrière. So for the benefit of our English audience, I will kind of translate that quickly. So basically what I'm saying is that our panel has a really diversified experience and they explore many professional avenues before they settle in their current job. So what I would like to hear more about is how did you diversify your skill and experience to ensure that you have a well-rounded career in the public service? Not only by jumping from one job to another, but beside that, like more holistically, how did you make sure that you would be able to have all the skills and competencies you needed to go where you wanted to go? So I'm opening the floor. Who would like to jump first? Please don't be shy. I will have to. Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
Go first. So I would say, it really, for me, it started in university. When I was a student, again, like I mentioned, I had no idea where I wanted to go, but I just knew that I wanted to spend my last year on campus trying to gain as many opportunities as possible to learn new things, make connections, and find my way into a career path that I thought would be exciting. And I studied in Vancouver, very, very far away from Ottawa. So for the people in the chat who are saying how discouraging it can be to find opportunities in the public service from outside of Ottawa, that's very, very real. I completely understand that because I found myself in that position when I was a student as well. But I think taking time to invest in my own projects, to volunteer, to really, gain the soft skills that I thought would be important for my career and my professional life is what helped me actually transition into the public service. So, beyond just being academically curious, finding those ways in your community and in volunteer roles to gain skills. I think sometimes people get into the trap of on their resume or in interviews only talking about formal experiences that were paid jobs. But I think some of the most important skills that I gained as a young person, as a student, came from things that were not necessarily formal jobs and that were paid. So skills of event planning, of communications, of basic office functions like email and writing. Those are things that you don't have to develop through a Government of Canada job, but are still very important for the Government of Canada. I think also taking time out of the public service to gain a bit of perspective. Sometimes people enter the public service right away and they stay there for the entirety of their career. But I think for me, taking time to see what was out there through co-op jobs, through internships, through fellowships that, really invested in my development helped me a lot. Things like the U of Mosaic Fellowship, for example, the Japan-Canada Academic Consortium. Those were some things that I remember being a student that were fully paid. It was a long application, but it was fully paid for. So I wasn't out financially. But those things really helped me network and meet people and gain some skills that were transferable to the public service.
Thank you. Thank you, Morel. Caitlin and Kevin, would you like to add something?
Sure, I can add something next. First of all, just for the person who said that they live in Toronto and they were discouraged, I'm actually working from Toronto right now, so it is possible. I know it's harder, but there are jobs, specifically Environment and Climate Change Canada, because they have offices sort of all over the country. And I was also lucky that the branch that I work for, they are okay with people working from basically anywhere as long as they can go into a Government of Canada office twice a week. So that I think is the key, maybe focus on departments that are bigger and so have more offices across the country. That might be helpful, but yeah, don't lose hope. It is possible. And then to speak to the skills and competencies part, I just wanted to say I really what Morel said about gaining experience, outside of the federal government perspective, those things, I totally agree. I think they can be really valuable. For context, I took a gap year in between my undergraduate and graduate degree where I worked in a completely different field. And again, like because I didn't study political science in undergrad, I worked several research jobs. So I think that definitely I think every job that you do, I think can either is valuable work experience, even if it's something you don't like, because I think you either learn something about what you would like to do in your future career, or I think you learn stuff about what you would not like to do in your future career. I think both of those things can be equally useful when you're like walking down your sort of career path to learn about what you don't like. It's equally valuable. And so but to focus on like specifically skills and competencies, I think my biggest thing is also do what you like kind of thing. So if you're someone who's really interested in, learning how to do data analysis, coding, like on your own, there are lots of different like courses and trainings, both within the context of the government that they offer for free for people who are employed or outside. Like develop the skills that you're sort of interested in. If data analysis is something you're interested in, then you can pursue that. If languages is something that you're interested in, then pursue that. And I think all of those things will be an asset to you in not just the federal, in a potential career in the federal public service, but in any career that you pursue. I think you'll be happier if you're working on skills that you genuinely enjoy. And I think that will like sort of lead you into a career that you enjoy, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. And then specifically to talk about like my experience in the federal government, for example, working at ECCC, they have sort of like library services where they offer trainings in different areas. So like Excel, basic coding skills, like all sorts of different things that you can take and sign up for. And I'm sure that other departments have similar services. As well as CSPS offers lots of different trainings, specifically targeted to students as well, that I remember seeing and taking when I was in my internships. So definitely take advantage of those like free opportunities that will be accessible to you if you do get an internship in the federal government.
Thank you, Caitlin. Over to you, Kevin.
I'll jump in quickly and make three points. The first one, I think everyone who's on this call should really think about developing your own toolkit that you take with you. I would call it almost like a government toolkit that you take with you at every single job you go to. And I would say for me, there are three tools that I take with me everywhere I go, and I know they will help me and set me up for success. The first one, as mentioned by Morel, was good writing skills. You need to know how to write. And what's tricky is that there's going to be a transition period because how you write in university is very different from how you write in public service and how you write briefing notes. It's a whole different way. So learn that quickly and become an expert, because that really, really helps you significantly in the public service. I think another one is being able to speak publicly and comfortably. Oftentimes you're briefing senior management. In my case, I work for Canada's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. I'm briefing her all the time. And so you have to be comfortable speaking publicly. And sometimes we go to meetings together and she turns on me and says, Kevin, what are your thoughts? So you have to be comfortable in those moments, I would say. And then the third element is just good judgment. And I think in university, you're taught how to think critically, right? If you're in sort of arts writ large, you're told read these different articles and analyze them, and you could do that analysis. But what you're not taught is judgment and really kind of weighing pros and cons to decisions, thinking through how is this going to impact X stakeholder and Y X stakeholder, and what is going to be the outcome of this. That kind of thinking is something that you don't learn in university, and I think it's something that you have to start picking up on quickly, because having good judgment in any setting or job in the government will really give you a good leg up. I want to speak to something that Morel said. It's actually very important. She lives in Vancouver, right? And I think it's easy to stay in Ottawa in this government world and be sucked into a bit of a bubble where you eat, sleep, and breathe government. And I just want to encourage everyone that, yes, it is amazing to work for the government. It's great. The benefits are fantastic. But also keep in mind, like, living in Ottawa might be a bit tougher for a younger 20-something, 30-something. And, you really should think about, like, what makes you happy as well, and where does your heart tell you to be and go? Because that's super, super important, because you can have a great career and fantastic success, but if you're unhappy in a city, that will not help you. So shout out to Morel for actually moving to Vancouver. I think that's, like, honestly a great idea and a brave thing that many people don't really do. And then the last thing I would say is, in government, in any position that you go to, the most important person is your manager. So you have to learn very quickly how to analyze, read, and understand your manager, and be able to put yourself in their shoes and give them what they want before they even ask you. Once you're able to really manage your manager, it really makes your life significantly easier, and you'll notice that it opens up many, many doors. So I would just say, keep that in mind. People skills, and be able to understand folks, read them, have a good analysis of them, and a good feel of what they want will really help you go a long way. And adjusting your style to kind of replicate them, I think those are tools that really help succeed in any government job.
Thank you, Kevin. And I agree with most of what you're saying. As a director myself, having people on my team, because I see a lot of questions about promotion and how to go up. But what I always tell to my team member is, I'm not always in a position to offer you a promotion as quickly as you would like, but grow horizontally. Up is not the only way to grow. This is my best advice that I can give them, because it will prepare them to go to the next step as well. It's not time that you're losing. It's time that you're putting on your, how can I say? You put that on in your pocket to be more prepared for the next job, and it will come more easily to you. And maybe you will find new passion or new avenues in the public service that you would not even have thought of. Donc, comme je le disais, pour moi, en tant que gestionnaire, un des meilleurs conseils que je peux donner à mes employés, c'est de grandir pas seulement vers le haut, mais de grandir horizontalement, pour s'assurer que vous découvrez des nouvelles avenues. C'est des façons simples d'avoir des nouvelles compétences, d'aller chercher des choses que votre emploi ne peut pas vous apporter, comme une promotion, parce que j'ai vu beaucoup de questions sur les promotions comment obtenir une promotion. Mais je vous dirais que d'un point de vue de gestion, dans la fonction publique fédérale, la promotion, c'est pas toujours la meilleure option pour vous développer. So, if I can jump in again, the other advice that I would give in that same vein, it's to think about your career as a marathon, not a sprint. So sometimes people want to go for the next gig, which is a promotion, but think about it. Each level comes with its responsibility. So if you don't want to do management, but you're stuck at an EC6 or an EC7 position early in your career, the only way up is still management. So really think about it this way. Think about horizontally, and think about every position and what they bring as responsibility, each of them. I'm looking in the chat, and I will try to bundle a few things together, right, to answer to most of people. So you have talked about going from one job to another, and there's two questions in the chat striking me right now. It's, what are the obstacles that you have faced while moving from one position to another? And the other one is, when did you know that it was time for you to go? So, Kevin, I see you're ready to jump in.
I'll jump in, and I'll say that, it's interesting. I've been in the government now for just over 5 years, and I think I can say I've changed jobs every single year. I've had 5 different jobs, and I've changed every single year. So I think I can speak to this and tell you that the biggest challenge of taking up a new job is the fact that in many cases, you will not be onboarded properly. And that's just a reality. It's just the transition, how things move, how things are documented. Oftentimes you won't have a full onboarding experience. So a lot of it is going to be up to you to kind of do an analysis very quickly as to, okay, I'm in this new job. Who are the key people that I need to meet with, and who are my allies that I need to get connected with ASAP? What documents can I read that are going to give me a base understanding of the subject that I now have to be an expert on? Who was in the job before me, and can I speak to them and have at least an hour-long conversation as to what they saw as opportunities and challenges, etc. So you really have to come in, you sit down, and you decide who are the relevant actors, how do I reach them, and what needs to be done now in the medium term and the long term. It's really about asking yourself those questions when you start, and not just running, but really doing that inner reflection and talking to the right people. I think that's really, really very, very important. And then, Josiane, can you repeat the second question?
Yes. When did you feel it was time to jump to another opportunity?
Great. So for that one, I would say, generally speaking, when you start a new job, there's a period of time, I would say between like 6 months to a year, where you are doing the learning and you are the one that's soaking in information from people. Then I would say there's a second period, which is maybe about a year or a year and a half or so, where you're now giving back and actually producing and contributing to the flow of work and doing some training for people perhaps, or you're contributing and giving back. And then, not to say there's a time period, but you will know, you reach a point where you look back and you said, all right, I have taken a lot from this job, I've learned a lot, but I've also given a lot. Maybe it's time for me to go. So it's really about just making sure that you've done the due diligence of learning and done enough to give back, and you feel like you've really helped establish the team in question. And then I think from there, you can ask yourself, is it time for me to go? And usually when you've actually helped out a lot, you have the support of your manager as well. So it's really kind of a delicate dance that you do. But I let my other panelists jump in.
Caitlin Morel, would you like to add?
So one of the things that has worked really well for me in the public service has been an approach to my career development, not in an attempt to chase levels and like run as fast up the ladder as I possibly could, but to be really intentional about the types of jobs that I accepted, and to think hard about the work that I wanted to do, and the impact that it would have. So when I joined Global Affairs Canada as a casual employee back in 2018, I had 90 working days ahead of me to complete. And I told myself, if I can stay in this job for a year and, hold on by my fingernails on the cliff of GAC's HR system, then that will be success. And if I stay for a year, then I can decide if I want to go somewhere else or if I want to stay. So I kind of always looked at the last 5 years, or at the 5 years I spent at Global Affairs Canada, in kind of incremental stages, because I was always on a contract. And every time my contract was up for renewal, I was able to sit there and think, okay, I could sit here and wait and try to do, the very stressful process of waiting for my contract to be renewed and signing it, and, having another year ahead of me in this job, or I could go somewhere else. And as long as I felt that there were things on the horizon that I wanted to achieve in the job, and there were challenges that would help me grow, I stayed. And it was only until I got to like my 4th or 5th UN negotiation in January last year, where I said, this is the negotiation that I'm going to get everything done that I've been preparing for the last 4 years. And we're going to do amazing things and ensure that women who are in peace operations with the UN have access to menstrual products and properly fitting protective equipment. And we're going to change the sexual harassment guidelines. And we're going to do all this amazing stuff. And when that's done, that's kind of the point where I will start to look for a new position, because I've done everything that I felt like I could. And I didn't feel like I was necessarily growing anymore. It wasn't a challenge for me every day to show up and think about, how do we solve this problem or what do we do next? At that point, I had been on the team and I was the most senior person, just from a time perspective, but also like in the like hierarchy of the working level folks on my team. And I said, it's time for me to find something new. And I really contemplated where I want to go next, but I always approached it from the perspective of what is the work that's important to me and what will have an impact. And at that point, I had already moved to Vancouver. I was working remotely. I had left the Ottawa region after 3 years, thanks to the pandemic. And when I spoke to many different departments, I ended up landing on Crown Indigenous Relations. And I took a lot of time to contemplate that job. It was really hard for me to work through some of the challenges of, understanding my position in this department as a representative of the Crown who negotiates with First Nations, and some of the positionality and the long history of like violence and colonialism and injustice, and the role that I, as a representative of the Crown, would kind of play in that relationship. But I stood back and I thought, I can't think of a more pressing and complex topic to work on, like treaties and title and self-determination and governance for First Nations, like is, I think, one of the most important things that I could contribute to as a public servant. And so after talking to many people and deciding that, that it was something that I think would be a challenge, that I thought would be a challenge, but also would help me grow and would hopefully have a positive impact on people, and reconciliation in this country, I decided to make the move. And it was technically like, I at Global Affairs, I was an acting EC6. And at Crown Indigenous Relations, they were offering me an indeterminate EC5. Well, I was already indeterminate, but I was just going to deploy to a different department. And even with that, like, pay cut, and cut in my seniority, it made sense to me and it mattered. That's not to say that you shouldn't chase higher levels, because your bills have to get paid and things are expensive these days. And that's a reality, especially if you're living in some really expensive cities. Certainly Vancouver, it's terrible price-wise. But so like, don't feel like you have to hold yourself back and stay at a lower level if it's not meeting your needs, because ultimately your job is there to sustain you. But don't always feel like you have to run up the ladder as fast as you can. If important work, if work that's important to you and that you feel passionate about and that has an impact is something that resonates, then like, don't be afraid to stay at a lower level for a little bit and take time to learn, because it will pay off eventually. So that's some of the stuff that I've learned.
Thank you, Morel. Caitlin, would you like to add?
Yeah, sorry. I've been listening to all the great responses. Could you just remind me what the initial question was? Because I have
Yes.
some thoughts, but I just want to make sure that I'm keeping them to the context.
So actually, when you're looking around for another job, let me summarize it a little bit. When you're looking around for another job, what is an incentive for you, and when do you know that it's time to go and jump to another opportunity?
So obviously I'm still very early in my career, so I've not necessarily hit this sort of milestone in the federal public service yet, but I have hit it elsewhere in my life. So I can sort of speak to it in a general sense. Definitely, if you're not feeling fulfilled, I think that's sort of what everyone has said in a bit of a nutshell. It's a reason to look elsewhere if you feel like you don't have any further opportunities for personal, professional growth. Speaking specifically to the federal government, in my case, I can already look ahead and see, for example, My department doesn't have EC4 positions, so I'm currently EC3. So, we just don't, not the department, sorry. Environment and Climate Change Canada has EC4s. My branch doesn't have, like my specific division doesn't have EC4s. And so if I wanted to do a more like stepwise upward climb, that would be a bit more difficult within the division. And so, if I eventually get to that point, which hopefully I will, I don't necessarily want to be EC3 forever, I might have to look elsewhere. And I think that like building connections already within my division, within the branch, within the department, externally to the department as well, staying in contact with also people from my previous internships as well. Just, because sometimes I think that's the best way for me right now is if you hear opportunities that are available, looking on GC jobs and getting yourself qualified in pools, which is honestly but I still don't fully understand how that process works. I'm also listening for advice from Kevin and Morel in that regard. But yeah, so those things I think you can sort of plan for a little bit in the future just by looking at the structure of your division. The other thing I will say is, like I said in the beginning, I would be interested in eventually gaining some experience on the more like policy development or negotiation side, just because that's what I went to school for. And I think in that regard, I received some advice from a colleague of mine who said that, because she actually was a policy analyst and then switched into evaluations. And she told me that, if that's something that you're looking to do, you need to do that earlier on in your career, because eventually you will hit a point where when people hire you at like the EC6 level, and even sometimes EC5, that they kind of expect you to hit the ground running. Whereas if you are hired at a lower level, EC3, EC4, sometimes EC5, that they're more willing to take you on and help you develop your professional skills. So that was just advice that I got from one person that I thought was valuable. Another thing that actually some classmates and friends I've seen go through, they've had a little bit more experience in the federal government, and they sort of hit a place in their careers where they were not super satisfied in the position that they were in. But what they were able to do was have sort of a conversation with their managers and supervisors about their role and responsibilities, and sort of take on make adjustments to their workload. So I feel like if you're feeling unfulfilled in your role or even in your internship, it's not necessarily like, obviously, I'm not saying don't go out and find a new one if that's what you feel like you need to do, absolutely. But just like there is sort of space in between that where you can talk to your manager and supervisor and say like, hey, I don't feel like I'm making the most of this opportunity. Is there any way that I could be involved in this file or this project or develop this skill more? And a lot of times, if you're a good manager, supervisor, they're definitely, I feel like they'd be willing to help you out and accommodate you in that regard.
Thank you, Caitlin. Et je vous écoute parler et ce que j'entends, c'est que la passion pour ce que vous faites est souvent plus importante que la paye. Je suis d'accord avec toi, Morel, que la paye n'est pas quelque chose à sous-estimer, mais en même temps, ça ne peut pas toujours être suffisant pour vous forcer à vous lever le matin. Sometimes good pay is great, but it's not the only thing that you need to wake up in the morning and thrive as a human being. The other thing that I find really interesting, and I see it coming a few times in the chat, and I heard that from what you've said a little bit, but I would like to go a little bit more in deep on that side of the conversation. Donc, j'aimerais aller un petit peu plus loin sur une autre question. Vous avez parlé beaucoup de vos collègues, des gens que vous avez rencontrés, de vos gestionnaires, mais les gens posent des questions aussi sur les mentors. Comment vous avez rencontré des gens dans votre parcours professionnel qui vous ont aidé à avancer? Comment ces gens-là sont importants pour vous dans votre carrière? So you have talked about your colleague, about your managers, and I'm pretty sure you have met some people along the way that were mentors to you. So how did you leverage all those nice people around you to go where you wanted to go in your career? Caitlin, you're right in front of me. Would you like to start?
Sure. So I've not had any, formal mentors or anything in my career. I think, but I've definitely had people who have given me very valuable advice and sort of guidance. I'd say more informal, like, mentorship in that regard. Um, in terms of how to go about seeking a mentor, honestly, I don't necessarily know that I have concrete advice for that. I feel like the best for me, I think I much prefer for it to happen more organically. In all of my internships, and actually most of my jobs, what I've been encouraged to do is sort of set up like little 15-minute chats with all my colleagues when I first get there, and just to say hi and get to know people. And I feel like those conversations have actually really um, been the most valuable to me because I've been able to learn about people where they've worked before, what they've done previously, their sort of professional history, and that's where I've been able to know who to go when I have a question or want some advice. Like the my colleague who I was talking about, who gave me the advice about switching from policy analyst to evaluator. That was just through like a 15-minute conversation. And since then, we've talked more about it, but it came up because we had that initial chat. So I think like if you do get an internship, I think it's like in every role that I've been in, it's a pretty common practice to set up a conversation and just chat with people about, get to know them a little bit. And that's how you can identify people who you might want to further develop a professional relationship with, outside of like being colleagues, but into where they can like maybe give you some advice and some pointers for when you are moving along in your career. If you have any, I'm assuming that everybody here is in university because of the is that like a fair assumption, Josiane? Okay.
A fair one. Most of the
Okay.
people are still
Okay.
the graduate program.
Okay. So if you have any professors who, who work in the public service, or who have experience working in the public service, you could also like maybe ask them to look over your resume and stuff. Some professors are more willing to do that than others. I know I had one who was willing to do that for us. He worked in the provincial public service. And so that was a big help when we were applying for internships. So things like that. I think, if you identify people who have work experience in the areas that you're interested in, just reaching out and asking them questions, asking them if they have any advice. And you know what, if they're not willing to give it to you, because some people are more willing than others, just depending, and that's not necessarily like because they're a bad person, but just everybody has different like time to give. Um, if they don't give you the best advice or they don't have enough time, you're no worse off than you were before. So it never hurts to ask. So yeah, I know it can be hard. Like I suffer the social anxiety thing. It's a tricky piece. But if you can even send an email, that I think will be beneficial.
Je suis vraiment d'accord avec toi, Caitlin. C'est pas toujours évident de commencer à établir une relation. Puis plus spécifiquement dans un monde virtuel aussi, je dirais que les conversations plus banales sont plus difficiles à avoir. In the virtual world, it's a little bit more difficult to do a little bit of a small chat, right? Meeting someone just like and casually ask your question. And it can create a lot of anxiety, but at the end, I think it could pay off. Morel, Kevin, would you like to add on what Caitlin said? You're too polite.
I'll jump in then and just maybe give you a little story of I have a mentor in the government who is top notch, and I'll just tell you the story so you get a sense of how that happened. So before joining Global Affairs Canada, I was at Employment and Social Development Canada. When you join these different departments, look for the young professionals networks because those are really great places for you to connect and make good connections with folks. And so I joined the Young Professionals Network, and there was a mentoring event that they had proposed where you would pay money on different executives in the department, and whoever wins the bid and pays the most money gets a mentoring session with them. So I had seen the chief operating officer of ESDC at the time, and I was like, I want to meet this person. They look like they know their stuff and they look like a very impressive person. I want to meet them. So I bid on them and I won. Then as some of you may know, she got shuffled out because when executives who are at the deputy minister level in the government, they often get shuffled to different departments. So she got shuffled out to go to global affairs. And then I then started my job at global affairs, not knowing that, quite frankly, she still owed me a mentoring session. It just kind of worked out perfectly. So this is now like May 2020, and the George Floyd, like Black Lives Matter movement is really starting to escalate. And we're seeing that there's like a paralysis in a lot of the leadership at Global Affairs in terms of how to respond to like what's happening in the world. They really had a bit of a hard time. So they sent a broadcast message to all employees at Global Affairs and said, we know this is a very difficult time. If any of you have ideas or if you have suggestions on how to engage, please let us know. I read that email and I decided I'm going to email this deputy minister who owes me a mentoring session. And I'm going to propose to her that we do a podcast where we talk about being Black at Global Affairs Canada and what that experience is like and what microaggressions look like, et cetera, and just having a conversation on being a young Black person. So I emailed her out of the blue. As a lowly employee, there's like 6 people between her and I, quite frankly, in the hierarchy. But I emailed her, and within an hour, she got back to me and said, "This is a great idea. Here are I'm copying in some folks who can make this happen." 2 weeks later, we record this lovely podcast that is still available. And I kid you not, that completely changed my life at Global Affairs. It just, people listened to that podcast and were very touched by it and were motivated and felt like it was really like a piece of, it was really something that was meaningful for a lot of folks. So now my mentor is, she retired. And when she retired, she invited me to her retirement party. And I was like, it was me and a bunch of these deputy ministers and assistant deputy ministers. And they were just like, who is this young guy? Where is he? Where does he fall into this? But just to give you a sense, she thought, I'm having a retirement party at Global Affairs. I'm going to invite this guy who helped me. So my story, I think, is just, I guess the main points are when you look for mentors, target people that you are inspired by, but also think about what you can go and offer them, because that's really what's going to create a strong bond. Myself and this now retired deputy minister go for coffees and walks in Ottawa now, and we just talk about life, and she gives me great advice. So don't forget that you also have a lot to offer and channel that, and don't be scared to cold call, cold email, and propose something to people, because quite frankly, too many of us are very shy and do not go and take that first step.
Donc, merci Kevin. C'est vrai qu'il faut prendre cette première étape-là. Parfois, comme toi, tu as rencontré une sous-ministre comme ça parce que tu as eu le courage de lui écrire, d'envoyer un petit message. Parfois, ça va loin. Morel, en 30 secondes, est-ce que tu voudrais ajouter quelque chose?
Yes. So one thing I'll say is I've learned the importance of searching for mentors at all levels and all stages of your development. Just because someone is a manager doesn't mean that they're a leader. And I have always looked for mentors who are good leaders, who are courageous, who are bold, and are willing to push back against the way things are always done. So look for those people at all levels in your system. I've learned the most from some of my colleagues at the working level who have now gone up into management positions, but who have taught me so much about what it is to be like a good public servant and someone who actually, tries to change things for the better. I'll say that when people give you mentorship and give you advice, that is then your responsibility to turn around and do the same for other people. So you need to be able to smash the barriers that you scale in your career with the help of other people, and know that that is also a function of public service. It's not just every day showing up to work and doing your job. Public service also, I think personally, and my philosophy, is a recognition that you have a responsibility to help other people access the jobs and positions that you've had access to. And so I want to make sure that anyone who has been here today, anyone who looks at that deck that I shared, that you remember that you now have a responsibility when you're further along in your career and more established to do the same and lend advice to other people.
Merci, Morel. J'aimerais remercier sincèrement, on arrive à la fin de l'heure. Je voudrais remercier sincèrement nos 3 panélistes qui ont partagé avec nous de manière franche et candide leur parcours. J'espère que tout le monde sur la ligne a apprécié autant que moi en apprendre plus sur eux et sur leur parcours. I sincerely would like to thank our panelists. Their frank and candid journey that they shared with us was really, really inspiring. Donc, au nom de l'École de la fonction publique du Canada, on behalf of the Canada School of Public Service and CAPPA, and the Federal Youth Network as well, I would like to thank all of you. J'aimerais vous remercier tous pour avoir assisté, mais aussi pour avoir partagé avec nous. Au plaisir et j'espère que vous avez apprécié. Bonne journée.